This year we have a very interesting class that we're calling the Unorthodox Propulsion class. An unorthodox propulsion, when we came up with the idea, was what about all these cars that have different systems of propelling them to what we're accustomed to? Because for 90 years now the main form of propulsion has been the internal combustion engine. That of course is changing as the world is turning more and more to electric cars. Well, we had a lot of electric cars at the turn of the last century. In 1900 there was more than 100 manufacturers of electric cars at that time, and they were extraordinarily popular with ladies, particularly like a town car, because they could jump in the car, turn the lever, pull the handle, and the car drove away silently. The demise of that came in 1909 when Cadillac introduced the electric starter. So you didn't have to hand crank an internal combustion engine car, and so it became easier for ladies to drive internal combustion cars, and you didn't have to recharge them. The batteries in those days obviously didn't last very long, and they were huge and heavy, big lead acid batteries. So you know, it's interesting how this has all evolved. The very first car that Porsche made was a hybrid, and that was in 1899 or something like that. So you know, most of this stuff that we have today, we had way back when. You know, one of the cars in that class is the Owen Magnetic. The Owen Magnetic was made in the teens. The car we're going to have on the field is from 1916, and Owen Magnetic is a conventional internal combustion engine. However, the only thing that drives to the rear wheels is an electromagnet. So they called it the car of 1,000 speeds, which is basically like one of these universal transmissions, right? It doesn't change gear. Again, that was what year are we in? That was 106 years ago. And the Owen Magnetic, there's a few of them around because they made quite a few, but there's very few of them that are actually working. So we were fortunate to find a car that is running and working. The engine drives a generator. The generator produces electricity that feeds an electromagnet, and the electromagnet becomes more powerful. The faster the engine runs, the faster the generator runs. And as it becomes more powerful, then it gives more drive to the rear end. So that's why they actually called it the car of 1,000 speeds in the day. Our oldest car in that class is a 1900 De Neon trike. And it did our tour, by the way. A very fit young guy who's also on our selection committee actually did 65 miles on that trike, and he did a lot of pedaling. And basically the trike has a direct drive from the rear wheels to the engine, and so if the trike stops, the engine stops, and then you got to pedal again to get the engine going again to restart it. So it's a pain in traffic because you're pedaling a lot more than you're actually driving. But he took it all the way down the coast to Big Sur and back, and I thought that was a pretty amazing feat. So you know, that's unconventional because you have to pedal it to start it, and every time you stop the engine, it stops. We have a Magola motorcycle from Germany made in Munich in 1922 that has a similar disadvantage in as much as it has a rotary 5-cylinder engine in the front wheel built into the spokes. So the crankshaft is the spindle, and that stays still, and the cylinders go around with the wheel. But again, it's got no clutch and it's got no gears, so if you come to a stoplight and stop, the engine stops because the wheel stops. And then to get it going again, you have to pedal with your paddle with your feet to get it rolling, and that gets the engine rolling, and then it fires and picks up again. It's supposed to be able to do 53 miles an hour, which hopefully it's not going to do it around here, but it does run. So that's very interesting. Jay Leno has one of those too, actually. I'm not sure that Jay's actually works, but this guy's runs, and he's very proud of it. Take that engine, that rotary engine, and lay it on its side and make it horizontal, and we have the Jarvis that has the engine behind the cab, and the cylinders go around in a horizontal circle, and it just goes, and it's a big engine too, it's quite heavy. That runs. It's part of the Hara collection in Reno, Nevada. We have a Stanley Steamer. It's a non-condensing, and it's a completely original car too. It's never been painted, it's original leather, everything's original on it, and it runs great. But being a non-condensing engine, the steam is total loss, so it's constantly surrounded by a huge cloud of steam, and it needs a lot of water, so it stops all the time to fill the boiler because it doesn't recycle through condensing. Then we have two very interesting Citroëns. A 1938 that runs on gasoline, and in the Second World War, when oil was very scarce, particularly for the Germans, but for the French too, they invented this system where you have a enclosed furnace, and that car, I think they run it on coal, but you could run it on wood, and you fill this big canister full of fuel, you light it at the bottom, you close it up, and in about 20 minutes it's burning hot enough inside, and it's sealed, and it's burning hot enough that the fumes that come off, which are predominantly methane and hydrogen, are then going through a pipe, through a filter, through a cooler because it's hot, and then it feeds into the carburetor. And you can drive the car running on the fumes from the coal. Now that kind of made sense in 1938 to me, because the world was starting to come under the Nazi power, and the French were very, very good at inventing this stuff. Chrysler produced a very interesting car in 1963, and it's a gas turbine car. It was bodied by Ghia. It's a very beautiful coupe, and I think they made 55 of them. They never sold any of them, to the best of my knowledge. They were sort of a lease thing for testing. They took them all back and destroyed them all, with the exception of 5 cars that were put in museums. And there's 5 of them still existing today in museums, and only 1 runs. And that's the car we have here on the lawn at Pebble Beach. So it'll be a gas turbine coming on here. And apparently it drives very nicely. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to drive in it yet, but they promised me a ride. So, you know, that's 1963 gas turbines. They weren't the only company doing that in 1963. There was a couple of Rover built a gas turbine engine in the UK. But and General Motors made the Firebirds, of course, Firebird 1, 2, and 3. They were all gas turbines and jet engines and things.